This nightmare didn't start with a bang, but with a buzzing phone on a lazy Sunday afternoon. It's the story of how a single phone call from my own flesh and blood, my younger sister, dragged me back into the chaos I thought I had escaped forever. It was a call that demanded I pay for the life of the man who had already stolen 30 years of my youth. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. I was sitting on my patio, surrounded by my prize-winning hydrangeas. At 60 years old, I had finally found peace. The sun was warm, my iced coffee was perfect, and for the first time in decades, I didn't have to answer to anyone. It had been exactly 6 months since the judge slammed the gavel and granted my divorce from Richard. 6 months of pure, unfiltered freedom. My phone vibrated on the glass table, shattering the silence. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Brenda, my younger sister. I frowned. Brenda and I used to be close, but things had gotten weird during the divorce. She had been distant, almost secretive. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but that old instinct to be the big sister kicked in. I swiped right. Hello? Joyce! Oh my God, Joyce, pick up! Brenda's voice screeched through the speaker, so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. In the background, I could hear the distinct, terrifying beep of hospital monitors and people shouting. Brenda? What's going on? Calm down, I said, sitting up straighter. It's Richard, he sobbed, her voice hysterical. There was a crash, a semi-truck. His car is totaled. He's in critical condition at St. Mary's. The doctors, they say he has internal bleeding. They need to operate right now, but his insurance has lapsed. They need a $50,000 deposit immediately or they won't prep the OR. You have to come. Bring the money, Joyce. Hurry, or your husband is going to die. I froze. For a split second, my heart hammered in my chest, a phantom reflex from 30 years of being trained to jump whenever Richard needed saving. But then the fog cleared. Your husband. I looked at the condensation dripping down my glass of iced coffee. I took a deep breath, letting the scent of the blooming flowers ground me. A cold, hard smirk formed on my lips. Brenda, I said, my voice steady and cool as ice. I think you need to check your contacts list. You've called the wrong person. What? Brenda screamed, her voice cracking. Are you crazy? I'm at the hospital. Richard is bleeding out. He's asking for you. He needs the money. You're the only one with that kind of cash since you sold the lake house. Get down here. I'm not crazy, Brenda, I replied, leaning back into my patio chair. I'm divorced. Richard is not my husband. He is my ex-husband. And as for his insurance lapsing, that sounds like a him problem. Why are you calling me? Why don't you call his new girlfriend? Or better yet, why don't you pay for it? There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then Brenda's voice dropped, turning venomous. How can you be so heartless? You were married for 30 years. Does that mean nothing? He's family. If you don't bring that money, his blood is on your hands. I'm going to tell everyone, Mom, the church, the neighbors, that you let him die over money. Get here now. I let out a laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was dry, bitter, and full of the exhaustion of a woman who had been gaslit for half her life. Go ahead, Brenda. Tell the Pope for all I care, but I am not a walking ATM anymore. That bank is closed. I hung up. I didn't just press the button, I pressed it with satisfaction. I stared at the black screen, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying no. They thought I was still the same old Joyce, the Joyce who worked double shifts to pay Richard's gambling debts, the Joyce who wore 5-year-old shoes so Richard could drive a luxury sedan. The Joyce who forgave every betrayal because family sticks together. But that Joyce was gone. She died the day I found out the truth about Richard and the truth about Brenda. I took a sip of my coffee, but the taste had turned bitter in my mouth. My mind began to drift back, rewinding the clock to see how we ended up here. How did a man I loved for 30 years turn into a stranger? And why was my own sister at the hospital screaming for his life like she was the grieving wife? To understand why I hung up that phone, you have to understand what happened 2 years ago. It started on my 58th birthday. That was the day the blindfold was ripped off my eyes and I saw the disgusting reality of the people I loved the most. I thought I had a happy marriage and a loyal sister. Turns out, I was just the bankroll for their secret lives. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more.
Let's rewind the clock 2 years. Back then, I wasn't the calm gardening woman I am today. I was a frantic, overworked head nurse at the city hospital, running on caffeine and sheer willpower. I was bringing in about $9,000 a month, busting my back with 12-hour shifts, while Richard was a consultant. That's what he called himself. In reality, he hadn't brought home a steady paycheck in 15 years. He spent his days networking at the golf course or brainstorming at high-end coffee shops, all on my dime. On the morning of my 58th birthday, I woke up expecting maybe breakfast in bed, or at least a card. Instead, I woke up to an empty bed and a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. "Gone to a meeting, big things coming, babe, /R." I sighed, suppressed the disappointment that had become my constant companion, and went to work. I spent my birthday managing a flu outbreak, skipping lunch, and getting yelled at by a patient's angry son. By the time I clocked out, my feet were throbbing. I met Richard and my sister, Brenda, at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. I thought, okay, maybe he planned a nice dinner. When I walked in, they were already seated, laughing over a bottle of expensive red wine. Brenda looked great, suspiciously great. She was wearing a silk scarf that looked exactly like the one I had lost a month ago. But I brushed it off. Sisters borrow things, right? "Happy birthday, big sis," Brenda chirped, pouring me a glass. "You look tired. You really should take better care of your skin." "I've been working, Brenda," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Someone has to pay the mortgage." Richard grabbed my hand, flashing that charming smile that used to make my knees weak. Now it just made me check for my wallet. "Don't be a downer, Joyce. Tonight is about celebration, and it's about the future." I froze. I knew that tone. That was the "I have a get-rich-quick scheme" tone. "Richard, not tonight," I warned. "Just listen," he pressed on, ignoring me. "My buddy Mark has an in on a new tech startup. It's guaranteed to triple in value in 6 months. I just need a little buy-in capital. It's a sure thing, babe." "How much?" I asked, cutting to the chase. $40,000, I said, as casually as if he were asking for salt. I slammed my fork down. $40,000? Richard, that is our entire emergency fund. That is for our retirement. Absolutely not. "Oh, come on, Joyce," Brenda chimed in, rolling her eyes. "Why do you always have to be such a control freak? Richard is trying to build an empire for you. You need to support your husband. A good wife invests in her man." "A good man supports his wife, Brenda," I snapped. "I have carried this family for 30 years. I am not emptying our savings for another one of his pipe dreams." The dinner was a disaster. Richard sulked, Brenda made passive-aggressive comments about my lack of vision, and when the bill came, a whopping $400, Richard patted his pockets and gave me a sheepish grin. "Must have left my wallet in the other jacket, babe. Can you get this?" I paid for my own birthday dinner while they finished the wine. I felt small, used, and incredibly lonely. But I told myself it was just a rough patch. I told myself they loved me in their own messed-up way. When we got back to the house, Richard went straight to the shower. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a headache coming on. His phone, which he usually guarded with his life, was sitting on the nightstand. It buzzed. I glanced at it. A text message popped up on the lock screen. It wasn't from his business partner, Mark. It was from a contact saved simply as B. The message read, "Did the old hag agree to give us the money? The condo deposit is due next week. I can't wait to move in with you." My blood turned to ice. Old hag? Condo? Move in? I looked at the bathroom door. The water was running. My hands shaking, I reached for the phone. I knew the passcode. It was my birthday, ironically. I unlocked it, and what I found didn't just break my heart, it shattered my entire reality. The text wasn't from a stranger, and the plan for that $40,000 wasn't for a tech startup. It was for something so twisted, so vile, that I almost threw up right there on the carpet. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. I stared at the glowing screen, my breath hitched in my throat. I tapped on the message thread, and my stomach dropped all the way to the floor. The contact B wasn't a business partner. It wasn't some random floozy from a bar. I scrolled up to the top of the chat, and my heart stopped. There was a photo, a selfie. It was Richard grinning like a teenager with his arm wrapped tight around a woman. They were clinking wine glasses in what looked like a hotel room. The woman was wearing the silk scarf I had lost. The woman was Brenda, my sister. The room started to spin. I had to grab the nightstand to keep from falling over. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut by a heavyweight boxer. B stood for Brenda. My husband and my own baby sister were having an affair, and judging by the timestamp on the first message, this had been going on for 2 years. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. I read the texts, each one a dagger in my heart. Brenda, did you ask the old cow for the money yet? The realtor needs the deposit by Friday if we want that condo in Florida. Richard, working on it, baby. She's stubborn, but she's desperate to keep me happy. I'll guilt trip her at dinner. Once we get the $40,000, I'll file for divorce and we can finally be free. Good. I'm tired of pretending to be the supportive sister. Looking at her wrinkled face makes me sick. I just want you. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. The old cow? Wrinkled face? This was the sister I practically raised after our mom got sick? This was the woman I helped pay for nursing school? And Richard, the man I had stood by through bankruptcy, unemployment, and his midlife crisis? They were plotting to strip me of my life savings and run off to Florida together? The bathroom door handle clicked. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it, gaslight me, or worse, he'd realize he couldn't get the money and might try to hurt me or steal it another way. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the cold, calculating head nurse who handled trauma without blinking. I quickly locked the phone, wiped the screen on the duvet to remove my fingerprints, and placed it back on the nightstand exactly how I found it. I threw myself onto the bed and pulled the covers up to my chin, turning my back to his side of the bed. Richard walked out, a cloud of steam and my expensive body wash following him. He was humming a happy little tune. The sound made my skin crawl. "Joyce, you asleep already?" he asked, his voice sickeningly sweet. I didn't move. I forced my breathing to be slow and rhythmic, feigning deep sleep. I felt the mattress dip as he sat down. He leaned over, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he reached past me and grabbed his phone. I heard the faint click of the unlock sound. He was checking Brenda's reply. "Soon, baby, soon," he whispered to himself. He turned off the lamp and lay down. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the shadows dancing on the wall. Every time his arm brushed against mine, I wanted to vomit. The betrayal was a physical weight, crushing my chest. But as the hours ticked by and the shock began to wear off, something else replaced it. A cold, hard rage. It started in my toes and worked its way up, burning away the tears. They think I'm an old cow? I thought, clenching my jaw. They think I'm stupid? They wanted my $40,000. They wanted to use me one last time before throwing me away like garbage. Well, I had news for them. I wasn't going to be the victim in their twisted little love story. I was going to be the villain. By the time the sun started to bleed through the curtains, I had dried my tears. I had a plan. I wasn't just going to divorce Richard. I was going to destroy them. I was going to make sure that by the time I was done, they wouldn't have a penny to their names, let alone a condo in Florida. But first, I needed concrete proof. Texts on a phone I wasn't supposed to look at wouldn't hold up if he had a good lawyer. I needed to catch them in the act, and I knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, I woke up and put on my best performance. I made coffee, I smiled, and I dropped the bait. "Richard," I said, pouring him a cup as he sat at the kitchen table, "I've been thinking about what you said last night about the investment." His eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. "Really?" "Yes," I lied, my voice steady. "I think you're right. We need to think about the future. But I need a few days to move some assets around. The bank is being fussy." "Take your time, babe. That's amazing." He jumped up and hugged me. I held my breath to keep from gagging. "In fact, I have to pull a double shift this weekend, overnight, so you'll have the house to yourself. Maybe you can use the time to plan the business strategy?" I saw the look that flashed in his eyes. It wasn't gratitude, it was opportunity. He was already planning to invite Brenda over the second I left for my shift. What he didn't know was that I wasn't going to the hospital, and the house wasn't going to be as empty as he thought. I was about to set a trap that would blow their secret wide open, but I had no idea what I was about to capture on camera would be far worse than just an affair. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. That Friday, I called in sick to the hospital, but I put on my scrubs anyway. I needed Richard to believe nothing had changed. Before I left, I spent an hour setting the stage. I hid 3 tiny nanny cams I'd bought at a spy shop downtown, one in the living room tucked inside a potted fern, one in the kitchen on top of the fridge, and one right on my bedside table, hidden in a hollowed-out alarm clock. Walking out the door was the hardest acting gig of my life. Richard was in the kitchen drinking the coffee I made him. I leaned in and pecked him on the cheek. My skin crawled. It took every ounce of willpower not to slap the mug out of his hand. "Bye, honey," I said, forcing a smile. "Double shift, don't wait up." "You're a saint, Joyce. Make that money," he called out, not even looking up from his phone. I drove 2 blocks down, parked in a supermarket lot, and pulled out my tablet. My hands were shaking as I connected to the live feed. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes, that's all it took. 10 minutes after my car left the driveway, a red convertible pulled up. Brenda hopped out, letting herself in with a key. My key, the spare key I kept for emergencies. I watched in silence as my sister walked into my living room like she owned the place. She threw her coat on my favorite armchair and kicked off her heels. Richard walked in from the kitchen, and they didn't just hug. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing in a way he hadn't laughed with me in decades. "Is the old witch gone?" Brenda asked, walking over to the liquor cabinet, my liquor cabinet, and pulling out a bottle of vintage scotch I was saving for my retirement. "Gone until tomorrow morning," Richard smirked, grabbing 2 glasses. "We have the whole palace to ourselves." Ugh, this place smells like rubbing alcohol and old people, Brenda sneered, looking around my clean, beautiful living room. When we get that $40,000, promise me we're getting a modern place, white leather, ocean view, no more of this antique junk. I promise, baby, Richard said, kissing her neck. Just play nice for a few more days. Once she transfers the money for the startup, I'll transfer it to our joint account, file the papers, and we're out of here. I sat in my car, tears hot and stinging in my eyes. It wasn't just the affair, it was the contempt. They hated me. They hated my house, my smell, my existence. They were just tolerating me until they could drain my account. But then the conversation took a darker turn. They sat on the sofa, my sofa, and Richard's face got serious. "Did you bring the papers?" asked Richard. "Right here," said Brenda, pulling a thick envelope out of her oversized purse. "I intercepted the mail before Joyce got home yesterday. She never even saw the second notice." "Good," Richard exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If she finds out I mortgaged the house behind her back, she'll kill me." I gasped so loud I fogged up my car window. Mortgaged the house? I paid off that mortgage 5 years ago. "Relax," Brenda laughed, tracing a finger down his chest. "She's clueless. She's so busy wiping rear ends at the hospital, she doesn't check the credit reports. By the time the bank comes to foreclose, we'll be sipping margaritas in Boca." My world tilted. They weren't just taking my savings, they had stolen my home. They had forged my signature and put my sanctuary, the only thing I truly owned, in jeopardy. I was technically homeless and I didn't even know it. I wanted to drive back there, kick down the door and scream. I wanted to tear Brenda's hair out. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed to know the full extent of the damage. I watched as Richard poured another drink, his hand trembling slightly. "I just hope the loan shark stays quiet until we leave. He's getting impatient, Bren. He sent me a text this morning." "Forget him," Brenda dismissed. "We're smart. We're going to win." Just then, a loud, aggressive pounding echoed through the video feed. Thump, thump, thump. Richard and Brenda froze. The color drained from Richard's face. He looked terrified, more terrified than I had ever seen him. "Is that Joyce?" Brenda whispered, her eyes wide. "No," Richard hissed, standing up and backing away from the door. "Joyce uses a key. That's him." "Who?" "The guy I owe the other money to," Richard whimpered. My blood ran cold. The pounding got louder, and then I heard a voice through the camera's microphone, a deep, gravelly voice that sounded like pure danger. "Open up, Richard. We know you're in there, and we know your wife has the money." I leaned closer to the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Richard wasn't just in debt to a bank. He was mixed up with people who broke legs for a living. And he hadn't just put himself in the line of fire, he had put a target right on my back. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The banging on the door stopped, but the silence that followed was even more terrifying. I huddled in the driver's seat of my car, staring at the tablet screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Through the grainy video feed, I saw Richard pressed against the door, sweating bullets, while Brenda stood in the middle of the room, looking like a deer in headlights. Then the voice on the other side of the door spoke again. It was lower this time, calm and menacing. "We know she works at St. Mary's, Richard. We know she gets off her shift at 7 a.m. If you don't have the cash by tomorrow, we're going to pay your wife a little visit in the parking lot. Maybe a broken arm will motivate you to pay up." I gasped, covering my mouth. They weren't just going to take my house. They were threatening my life. I was the collateral for Richard's mistakes. Footsteps crunched down the driveway on the video feed. Richard slumped against the door, sliding down until he hit the floor. Brenda rushed over, but she didn't comfort him. She kicked him hard. "You idiot," she screamed, her face twisted in ugly rage. "You said you owed the bank. Who was that? Why are they talking about hurting Joyce?" Richard put his head in his hands, sobbing. I tried to fix it, Bren. I took the mortgage money, the money I got from forging her signature, and I tried to double it at the track. I thought if I won big, I could pay off the house, and we'd have extra for Florida. But I lost. I lost it all." "You lost the mortgage money?" she shrieked. "So we have nothing? No house? No cash?" "We still have her savings," Richard looked up, desperation in his eyes. "That $40,000 she promised for the startup. Once she transfers that, I can pay the sharks off. We just have to keep playing nice for one more day." I switched off the tablet. I had seen enough. My hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore. I was shaking with pure, unadulterated fury. They were willing to let me get beaten up or worse, just to buy themselves a little more time. Richard was going to feed me to the wolves to save his own skin. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of the parking lot. I wasn't going to the police station, not yet. I had one stop to make first. I needed to secure that $40,000 before Richard found a way to steal it. I drove like a maniac to the bank, making it 10 minutes before closing. I ran inside, still wearing my scrubs, breathless. "I need to withdraw everything," I told the teller, slamming my ID and debit card on the counter. "My savings, my checking, close it all out, now." The teller, a sweet girl named Sarah who had known me for years, looked concerned. She typed my account number into her computer. Then she frowned. She typed it again. "Mrs. Thompson," she said slowly, looking up at me with pity in her eyes. I can't do that." "Why not?" I snapped. "It's my money." She said, "Because there's nothing to withdraw." The world stopped. "What?" Sarah turned the monitor toward me. "Your joint savings account was emptied this morning. A transfer of $42,000 was made to an account under the name Brenda Miller." I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. $0.00. They hadn't waited for me to agree to the investment. Richard must have guessed my password, or Brenda had looked over my shoulder at some point. They had already stolen it. They were celebrating in my house, drinking my wine, talking about their future, while I stood there with absolutely nothing. I walked out of the bank in a daze. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the parking lot. I had no husband, no sister, no home, no savings, and a loan shark was coming for me in the morning. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could have driven away. I could have run. But the Joyce who ran away died in that bank lobby. I started the engine. I wasn't going to hide. I was going home, and I wasn't going to knock. I pulled up to the house, my house, 10 minutes later. The red convertible was still in the driveway. I walked to the trunk of my car and popped it open. I reached past the spare tire and pulled out the heavy metal tire iron. It felt cold and solid in my hand. I walked up the path to the front door. I could hear music coming from inside. They thought they had won. They thought I was working a double shift, oblivious and broke. I put my key in the lock. I turned it slowly. The door clicked open. I stepped into the hallway. Richard and Brenda were in the kitchen. I could hear the clink of glasses. "To us," Brenda giggled, "and to the old hag financing our vacation." "To us," Richard laughed. I tightened my grip on the tire iron and stepped into the light. The look on their faces when they saw me standing there, looking like an avenging angel, is something I will take to my grave. But they had no idea that I wasn't there to fight for my marriage. I was there to deliver a piece of news that would turn their victory into a living nightmare. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The sound of shattering glass was the only thing that broke the silence. Richard's hand had gone limp, dropping his crystal tumbler to the floor. Red wine, my vintage Bordeaux, splattered across the pristine white tiles like a crime scene. Brenda screamed, scrambling backward over the kitchen island, knocking over a bowl of fruit. "Joyce, have you lost your mind? Put that thing down!" I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, gripping the cold steel of the tire iron, staring at the two people who had turned my life into a tragedy. "To the old hag," I repeated, my voice low and steady. Wasn't that the toast? Well, the old hag is here, and she's not paying the tab this time. Richard found his voice, though it was shaking. He held up his hands in surrender. "Babe, wait! Put the iron down! We were just celebrating the investment, the money you agreed to. I transferred it to keep it safe from, hackers." I laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound that made Richard flinch. "Hackers?" I took a step forward, crunching over the broken glass. The hackers who want to break my legs in the parking lot tomorrow morning? I saw the video feed, Richard. I heard the man at the door. I know about the loan sharks. I know about the forged mortgage. And I know you two have been sleeping together for 2 years. The color drained from Brenda's face so fast she looked like a ghost. Richard looked like he was about to throw up. "Joyce, please," Richard stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not what it looks like. I can fix this. We just need the money." "The money is gone," I cut him off. "I went to the bank, Richard. I saw the transfer to Brenda's account." Brenda straightened up, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. She crossed her arms, trying to look tough. "Well then, you know it's too late. The money is mine now. You can't touch it. So you might as well drop the weapon and get out of our house. Richard and I are leaving for Florida tomorrow anyway." I looked at my sister. I looked at the woman I had protected from bullies on the playground, the woman I had bought prom dresses for. I realized then that I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She thought she had won the jackpot, but she had actually just bought a ticket to the Titanic. "You're right, Brenda," I said, lowering the tire iron slightly. "I can't touch the money in your account." I walked over to the kitchen table where Richard's phone sat. I raised the tire iron and brought it down with a sickening crack, smashing the screen into a spiderweb of plastic and glass. Richard yelped, "My phone!" "I'm leaving," I said, turning to walk out. "I'm taking my car, my clothes, and my dignity. You two can keep the house, you can keep the debt, and you can keep each other." "You can't just leave," Richard screamed, panic finally setting in. "The sharks, they said they'd come for you. You have to help me." I paused at the doorway and looked back over my shoulder. "I don't have to do anything, Richard. That's the beauty of divorce. But you should probably know one thing before I go." "What?" he breathed. "When I was at the bank," I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile, "I didn't just check the balance. I flagged the transfer as fraudulent activity due to the forged mortgage. The bank manager froze Brenda's account 10 minutes ago. It's under investigation by the fraud department. You can't access a single cent." Brenda let out a strangled cry and scrambled for her phone to check her banking app. "Oh, and Richard," I added, opening the front door to the cool evening air, "I wouldn't worry about the loan sharks coming for you tomorrow. I think they're going to be much more interested in the man who is stuck in this house with no money, no car, and nowhere to run." I slammed the door shut behind me, muting Brenda's screams of rage. I walked down the driveway, my heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and liberation. I had thrown the grenade. Now I just had to get out of the blast zone. But as I reached my car, I saw another set of headlights turn onto the street. A black SUV was moving slowly, prowling like a shark in dark water. It slowed as it passed my house. I dove into my car and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I thought I had escaped, but as I looked in the rearview mirror, I realized the nightmare wasn't over. The black SUV didn't pull into the driveway. It pulled up right behind me, blocking me in. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The headlights of the black SUV blinded me, reflecting off my rearview mirror like the eyes of a predator. I sat frozen in my sedan, my hand hovering over the gear shift. I was trapped. The engine of the SUV idled with a low, menacing rumble that vibrated through my car seat. A man stepped out. He was huge, wearing a leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too small for his muscles. He didn't look like a banker. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like consequences. He walked slowly toward my driver's side window. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I thought about locking the doors, but a lock wouldn't stop a man like that. I took a deep breath, channeling 30 years of dealing with unruly patients and arrogant doctors. I channeled every ounce of head nurse energy I had left. I rolled the window down just 2 inches. "Mrs. Thompson?" the man asked. His voice was gravel, deep and flat. "It's Miss Miller," I corrected him, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm using my maiden name effective immediately." The man chuckled darkly. He leaned down, his face close to the glass. "Names don't pay debts, lady. Your husband owes my boss $50,000, plus interest. We heard you were the one with the deep pockets." "I heard wrong," I said, locking eyes with him. "The man inside that house isn't my husband. He's a fraudster. He forged my signature on a mortgage, stole my life savings, and gave it to his mistress. I just flagged every account we have for fraud. The police are on their way to arrest him for identity theft." It was a bluff. I hadn't called the cops yet, but it was the only card I had to play. The man's expression shifted. He didn't look scared, but he looked annoyed. "Police? They'll be here in 5 minutes, I lied, checking my watch. "And since I have $0 to my name thanks to him, you're wasting your time with me. But," I pointed a thumb over my shoulder toward the house, where Brenda and Richard were undoubtedly scrambling in panic, "he's inside. He has a red convertible keys on the counter. There's expensive jewelry in the bedroom, and I believe his mistress just transferred $42,000 into an account that if you hurry, you might be able to convince them to access before the bank fully locks it down." The man looked at me, then looked at the house. He seemed to weigh his options: harass a broke woman in a Honda or go after the guy with the assets and the mistress. "You're cold," the man muttered, a hint of respect in his eyes. "I learned from the best," I replied, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Now please move your truck. I have a life to restart." The man stared at me for another second, then tapped the roof of my car twice. "Go." He signaled to the driver of the SUV. The massive vehicle reversed, clearing the driveway. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I slammed my foot on the gas and peeled out onto the main road, leaving the nightmare of my suburban life in the rearview mirror. As I turned the corner, I saw the man and 2 others walking up the path to my front door. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I felt light. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and lemon pledge, but to me it smelled like freedom. I sat on the lumpy bed and finally let the tears come. I cried for the 30 years I wasted. I cried for the sister I lost, but mostly I cried because I knew the war wasn't over. The next 6 months were a blur of lawyers, courtrooms, and ugly accusations. Richard managed to survive the encounter with the loan sharks, though he lost the car, the furniture, and his dignity in the process. He and Brenda turned on each other the moment the money ran out, but they united for one last goal: to make my life a living hell during the divorce proceedings. They tried to claim alimony. They tried to claim half my pension. They dragged my name through the mud in our small town, telling everyone I was an abusive, cheating shrew who abandoned her sick husband. But I stood tall. I had the video evidence. I had the bank records. And eventually I got the gavel slam I had dreamed of. Absolute divorce. No alimony, a restraining order. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had cut the cancer out of my life completely. I bought my small cottage with the little money I had left, planted my hydrangeas, and started to heal. But as I sat on my patio that Sunday afternoon, staring at the phone screen where I had just hung up on Brenda, I realized that some cancers don't just go away, they metastasize. I had hung up on them. I had refused to pay. I felt triumphant. But then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Brenda. It was an unknown number, a local area code. I answered, thinking it might be the pharmacy. "Hello? Is this Joyce Miller?" a deep professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "This is Detective Miller from the Highway Patrol," the voice said, and my stomach dropped. "Ma'am, we need you to come down to St. Mary's Hospital immediately. It's regarding the accident involving Richard Thompson." I'm not his wife anymore," I stammered. "I told my sister—" "I know, ma'am," the detective interrupted, his voice grave. "But this isn't just about the accident. We found something in the wreckage of his car, something that has your name on it, and frankly, it changes everything about this crash. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more."
I drove to St. Mary's Hospital with a knot in my stomach so tight it felt like I'd swallowed a stone. The last time I was here, I was wearing scrubs and a badge, running the floor. Now I walked through the sliding glass doors as a civilian, clutching my purse like a shield. The smell hit me first, that mix of antiseptic and stale coffee. It brought back 30 years of memories in a single breath. But I didn't have time to reminisce. I saw them near the ER waiting area. Or rather, I heard them. "She's the reason! She's the one who cut him off!" It was Brenda. My sister looked like a train wreck. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. Her hair was a bird's nest, and she was wearing a stained tracksuit. The glamorous mistress facade was gone. She was just a desperate, broke woman screaming at a nurse. When she saw me, her eyes practically bulged out of her head. She charged at me. "You!" she screeched, pointing a shaking finger in my face. "You showed up! Did you bring the check? Did you finally grow a heart?" "Back off, Brenda," I said, my voice cold. I didn't step back. I stood my ground. "I didn't come here for you. I came for the police." "Police?" Brenda laughed hysterically. "Richard is fighting for his life and you call the cops? You monster! He was coming to see you, you know. He was driving to your house to beg for forgiveness. He wanted to fix things. And now look at him." "Mrs. Miller?" A tall man in a gray suit stepped between us. It was the detective who had called me. He had a look on his face that I knew well from my years in the ER, the look of someone who has bad news, but not the kind you expect. "Detective," I nodded, ignoring my sister's sobbing. "What is this about? Why am I here?" "Let's step aside," Detective Miller said, guiding me away from Brenda and into a quiet family consultation room. He closed the door, blocking out the noise of the ER. He placed a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was a charred black duffel bag.
"We recovered this from the trunk of Mr. Thompson's car," the detective said. "The fire from the crash didn't reach the trunk, fortunately. We found 2 things inside that concern you." "Concern me?" I frowned. "I haven't spoken to Richard in 6 months." "First," the detective said, pulling out a slightly singed document, "is this. It's a life insurance policy, taken out 3 weeks ago. It insures your life, Joyce Miller, for $750,000. My blood ran cold. I never signed that. I have my own policy." "We figured," the detective said grimly. "The signature looks forged, but the beneficiary listed is Richard Thompson." I stared at the paper. Richard had bet on my death. $750,000. That was enough to pay off his debts and buy a new life. "But that's not all," the detective continued. He reached into the bag and pulled out something that made the room spin. It was a red gas can, or at least the remains of one, and next to it, a hand-drawn map. I leaned closer, my hands trembling. The map wasn't just a scribble, it was a detailed layout of my new cottage. There were markings, back porch, kitchen window, and a time written in the corner, 2 a.m. "Ma'am," the detective said, his voice low and serious, "the crash happened at 1:15 a.m., about 10 miles from your house. He wasn't coming to beg for forgiveness. He had 5 gallons of gasoline and a lighter in the front seat. He was coming to burn your house down to collect the insurance money." I gasped, covering my mouth. Tears sprang to my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure horror. Brenda's words echoed in my head. He was coming to fix things. He was coming to kill me. He was going to torch my sanctuary with me sleeping inside to collect the insurance money. The only reason I was standing here breathing was because a semi-truck ran a red light and smashed into him first. "Karma," I whispered. It was the only word that fit. "If he wakes up," the detective said, "he's looking at charges for attempted murder, arson, and insurance fraud. But that's a big if. His injuries are catastrophic." Just then, the door to the consultation room burst open. A doctor in blue scrubs stood there, looking exhausted. He looked at me, then the detective. "Family of Richard Thompson?" he asked. I stood up, wiping the shock from my face. I needed to see this through. I needed to see the face of the man who tried to murder me for a payout. "I'm his ex-wife," I said, my voice steady again. "Is he alive?" The doctor took a deep breath and shook his head slowly. "He's alive, but I need you to come with me. There's a complication, a severe one, and his sister is hysterical. She won't listen to us. We need you to make a decision." I followed the doctor down the hallway, the detective trailing behind. My heart was pounding, not with love, but with a terrifying curiosity. What could be worse than death? And why, after everything he tried to do to me, was his fate suddenly back in my hands? If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The doctor led me to a window looking into the ICU. Inside, Richard looked small. He was hooked up to a dozen tubes, his face swollen and bruised, a neck brace holding his head rigid. But his eyes were open. They were wide open, darting around the room in pure panic. "Is he awake?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. "That's the complication," the doctor said softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "The impact caused a severe injury to his brainstem. It's a condition called locked-in syndrome. Richard is fully conscious. He can see, he can hear, and he can feel pain. But he cannot move a single muscle in his body except for his eyes. He is completely paralyzed." I stared at the man who had tormented me for 30 years. He wasn't dead. He was trapped. He was a prisoner in his own body. Suddenly, Brenda came rushing down the hallway, shoving a nurse aside. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "You heard him! He's alive! But he needs the stabilization surgery immediately or his organs will shut down. It's $50,000, Joyce. You have the money from the lake house sale. Write the check. He's suffering." I looked at Brenda. Then I looked through the glass at Richard. His eyes locked onto mine. I saw fear. I saw desperation. He was begging me. I pulled my arm out of Brenda's grip and smoothed down my jacket. "You want me to pay $50,000 to save him?" "Yes," Brenda sobbed. "He's family. He made a mistake, but he doesn't deserve to die." "You're right," I said calmly. "He doesn't deserve to die." I reached into my purse and pulled out the evidence bag the detective had given me, the charred map and the forged life insurance policy. I slapped them against the glass window, right where Richard could see them. Richard's eyes widened in terror. The machine monitoring his heart rate started to beat faster. Beep, beep, beep. "What is that?" Brenda asked, squinting at the papers. "This," I said, my voice cutting through the hospital noise like a knife, "is proof that your boyfriend wasn't coming to apologize, Brenda. He was coming to burn me alive." Brenda froze. "What?" "He took out a policy on my life 3 weeks ago," I continued, staring directly at Richard. "He was going to torch my cottage with me inside, collect the $750,000, and run off into the sunset with you. But he crashed. He didn't crash because he was distracted by guilt. He crashed because he was driving like a maniac to get to my house before I woke up." Brenda snatched the papers from the glass. She read them, her hands trembling violently. She looked at the map, then at the insurance claim. She looked at Richard, and for the first time I saw the love in her eyes die. It was replaced by pure horror. You were going to kill her?" Brenda whispered, staring at the man in the bed. Richard blinked rapidly. "I'm sorry, help me." I stepped closer to Brenda. "So, no, I won't be writing a check for $50,000. I won't be paying for his surgery. I won't be paying for his long-term care facility. And since you are his next of kin now, his partner, his accomplice, that bill belongs to you." I don't have that kind of money," Brenda shrieked. "Joyce, please, if you don't pay, they'll transfer him to a state facility. He'll rot in there." "Then he rots," I said simply. I walked up to the glass one last time. I leaned in close, knowing Richard could hear every word. "You wanted to take my life, Richard. You wanted my money. Well, you didn't get either. Instead, you got exactly what you deserve. You have a long life ahead of you. You're going to lie in that bed, unable to speak, unable to move, with nothing but your own thoughts to keep you company. You're going to watch Brenda resent you more and more every day as she drowns in your debt. Welcome to your own personal hell." Richard's eyes filled with tears. A single tear rolled down his cheek, but he couldn't lift a hand to wipe it away. I turned my back on him. The satisfaction I felt wasn't happy. It was heavy, like a judge delivering a life sentence. "Joyce!" Brenda grabbed the hem of my jacket, falling to her knees on the dirty hospital tile. "Don't leave me with him. I can't take care of a cripple. I have no money. Please." I looked down at my sister, the woman who stole my husband, mocked my age, and plotted my ruin. "You wanted him, Brenda," I said, pulling my jacket free. "You won. He's all yours." I walked away. I walked past the stunned doctor, past the grim-faced detective, and out the automatic doors into the night air. The sirens were still wailing in the distance, but for the first time in 2 years, the silence in my head was beautiful. I thought walking out those doors would be the end of the story. I thought I would drive home and never look back. But fate has a funny way of tying up loose ends. 2 years later, on a snowy Christmas Eve, I would cross paths with them one last time, and what I saw on that street corner would haunt me and satisfy me for the rest of my days. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more.
Time has a funny way of sorting out the truth. 2 years have passed since I walked out of that hospital, leaving my sister and ex-husband to the fate they created. 2 years of peace, rebuilding my credit, and finally growing those prize-winning hydrangeas without anyone complaining about the cost of fertilizer. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. It was Christmas Eve in Chicago, and the city was buried under a foot of fresh snow. I was driving my new SUV, paid for in cash, home from a volunteer shift at the women's shelter. The heated seats were on, soft jazz was playing, and I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the car's heater. I stopped at a red light near the downtown district. The streets were crowded with last-minute shoppers, but my eyes were drawn to a scene unfolding near a bus stop bench. A woman was struggling to push a heavy, rusted wheelchair through the slush. She was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather, and her hair, once dyed and styled, was gray and matted. I squinted through the falling snow. It was Brenda. She looked 20 years older. The stress lines on her face were deep canyons of bitterness. She wasn't the glamorous mistress anymore. She was a tired, broken caregiver. She stopped the wheelchair to adjust the blanket over the man's legs. The man was Richard. He sat there like a statue, staring blankly ahead. His face was gaunt, his skin pale and wax-like. He couldn't shiver, even though the wind was biting. He couldn't pull the blanket up himself. He was trapped in that frozen body, fully conscious, watching the world move on without him. I rolled my window down just a crack, letting the cold air in to hear them. "Stop crying!" Richard snapped at him, her voice raspy and harsh. She aggressively wiped his face with a dirty tissue. "You think I want to be out here? We missed the bus because of you. Now we have to wait another hour in this freeze. Swallow your spit, Richard. I'm sick of cleaning you up." Richard's eyes, the only part of him that could move, darted frantically side to side. They were filled with tears. He looked terrified. He looked miserable. Brenda looked up, exhaling a cloud of frustration, and her gaze landed on my car. She froze. Even through the tinted glass and the falling snow, she recognized me. Or maybe she just recognized the look of a woman who was free. She stared at my clean, warm car, then down at her slush-covered boots. For a second, I thought she might scream. I thought she might run over and bang on my window, begging for money or cursing me out. But she didn't. She just slumped her shoulders, defeated. The envy in her eyes was so heavy it looked like physical pain. She turned her back to me and started pushing the wheelchair again, struggling against the ice, yelling at Richard to stop being dead weight. The light turned green. I didn't honk. I didn't wave. I didn't feel the urge to roll down my window and offer them a ride. That part of me, the fixer, the savior, the doormat, was dead. I gently pressed the gas pedal and drove past them.
I watched them disappear in my rearview mirror, fading into the gray winter twilight until they were just specks in the distance. I drove home to my cozy cottage. My friends were coming over for dinner. I had a roast in the oven and a bottle of wine breathing on the counter, wine that no one was going to steal. As I walked into my warm house and closed the door against the cold, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't leaving them penniless, it was leaving them behind. Final message from Mama Joyce's Chronicles. Dear listeners, we have reached the end of this twisted road with Joyce, Brenda, and Richard. The image of a wheelchair stuck in the snow, a sister drowning in regret, and a woman driving towards her peace, it's a powerful ending, isn't it? This story isn't just about a cheating husband or a greedy sister. It's a lesson on the brutal, beautiful law of the universe. You reap what you sow. Richard and Brenda planted seeds of betrayal, greed, and malice. They tried to burn down a good woman's life to warm themselves. In the end, they were left out in the cold, bound together not by love, but by a punishment they carved out for themselves. Richard is a prisoner in his own body, and Brenda is a prisoner of her own choices. But the real victory belongs to Joyce. She teaches us that no is a complete sentence. She teaches us that walking away isn't weakness, it's the ultimate act of self-love. She didn't let bitterness consume her, she let it fuel her transformation. So, if you are holding on to a relationship that drains you, or if you are letting family guilt trap you in a cage, let Joyce's story be your wake-up call. You are the author of your own life. Don't let anyone else hold the pen. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If this story touched a nerve or sparked a fire in you, please help us grow. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of our lives together. Until next time, keep your head high, your heart guarded, and your coffee iced. Goodbye and stay strong. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more.